Good afternoon, everybody. How are you? Okay. Okay, it is 5:30, so we want to move right along and call this meeting to order. So, if I can, I'm just going to do a quick roll call. If I can, Trustee Steve,
Aye, present.
Trustee Brown,
Present.
and Trustee House is present as well. We're going to start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, if we can remain standing, I'm just going to do our prayer. Heavenly Father, we come to you today just to say thank you. Thank you for another opportunity to do your will. We ask that you touch the minds, hearts, and spirits of everybody in this room in our community, that we come together and move our village forward financially responsibly. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Okay, so with the agenda, what the plan or the intention is we have it broken down in old business and new business. I know we haven't had a finance meeting in a while, but the things under the old business are items that we want to make sure are on our minds on a consistent basis. So we will see those on a reoccurring month over month meeting, and then we want to make sure that we're talking the same language with one another, so that way we understand what we're looking at, or I'm communicating the same way that you are and the board. So if there's an issue, we're not looking at verbiage, but we're talking about what the issue is. If there are items that anybody feels or would like to see on there, please feel free during Citizens Address or any other time, bring it up to any one of the committee members, and we will do our best to include them. On this report, we're going to go over the monthly financial report, a couple of areas that we're going to highlight, and I'm going to kind of just go through a couple of the pages that I think are key. But if there are questions, as with anything else, please feel free to ask them. The two accounts or the two funds that we want to focus on the most are the general fund, which is where most of our money comes in, as well as the water fund, because we know we have reoccurring conversation and challenges with the water. So we want to make sure that we know where we stand. So the first packet that I passed out, it is a pretty big one. So I'm just going to go to the key pages, or the ones that I look at first for the key pages. So if we look at it on page 10 within the packet, so pages 3 through 10 are a summary of the money that comes into our general fund. So I go straight to our page 10, and well, I guess what I did not mention, the report we're looking at right now is as of April 30th, 2019. The reason that we're starting with that is April 30th represents the end of our fiscal year. So this report will reflect what all items that have happened through the end of our fiscal year. As we come to next month's meeting, we will combine 2 months together, and then from that date forward, we'll continue to be probably about 2 to 3 weeks, reviewing 2 to 3 weeks behind. Yes. Oh, well, this will be the monthly report. So with or without a budget, we're going to have a report each month, but we will be able to compare. As we have the budget, we can compare how we're doing to the budget. Without a budget, we just know if we're making money or we're losing money, but we won't know how it compares to what we budgeted for. Okay. But having said that, this is April 30th report, end of the fiscal year, and it is unaudited, meaning that when the auditors come in, they do make some adjustments. If some of the terms, we all have different levels of familiarity, so please forgive me if I'm going over things that may be redundant to some, but I want to make sure, again, that we're all using similar terminology, and so that way we're speaking the same language. Well, a quick one, but we want anything that's. Mm-hmm. So on page 10, where I look at right towards the middle, before we look at other financing sources, the excess deficiency of revenues over or under expenditures, that's the line that will tell, without looking at bond funding or one-time items, that tells how we did in terms of operating. So on that line, it says in April, we had a surplus of $204,000 for the month. For the fiscal year to date, which concluded the year, there was a deficit of $75,000 for the year. So our general fund off normal operations had a $75,000 deficit. Now, when you include the bonds and other one-time funding, then you go to the bottom line where it shows the deficit, but that's also including the fund balance, which are like retained earnings. So that's where you start looking at your balance sheet and things that you've carried over from years before. So I don't think, in my opinion, it doesn't give the best reflection of what the year looks like. The $75,000 deficit gives our normal operating expenses or deficits for the year. So just to kind of recap, general fund for the fiscal year of 2019, deficit in the general fund of $75,000, and for the month of April, $204,000 surplus. Now I'm going to do the similar thing that we've done with the general fund with the water fund. Oh, sorry, question, trustee. I would have to print up some. We'll hold one moment. Trustee Steve is gonna. Okay. Thank you, trustee. Mm-hmm.
What does that number represent then? That's in the deficit. You said it includes the bond,
fund
which
balance
we haven't
is
paid for yet.
Yeah,
right?
the
That
fund balance
1.3.
is a carryover from year over year. So in a for-profit organization, you have retained earnings.
Right.
Fund balance is the equivalent of retained earnings. So that's a carryover of last year, some of last year's debt, along with last year's revenue that hasn't been received.
Okay.
Okay. Now, if we can, I'm gonna try my best to speed through these so that way we can go to a citizen's address and we can get to most of it. But thank you for the. We're looking for the question, so I don't want to shut it down totally, but we do want to make sure we kind of keep going. So I'm going to go to the water fund, and for the water fund, that is on page 14. So if we look at the similar numbers, page 14, we have the operating, where am I looking at? At the very bottom, the net position for the end of the year, $57,000. Am I looking at this one right? Oh, this is the sewer fund. My apology. Let me go to the actual water fund. The water fund is on page 12. The page we're looking at is the sewer fund, so we can do the same information with the sewer fund as well. I'm choosing the water fund because we know of the delinquency we have to the city of Chicago. So as we look at on page 12, the operating income or loss for April, a loss of $163,000. Fiscal year to date shows a surplus of $1,080,000. So overall, it would give our water fund was doing well. One area when I spoke with our accountants that we have not done historically, and as we're moving forward, we have to do better at, is we have not included all of the expenses of the water fund. Meaning we have employees that are listed on our general fund that are actually doing work with the water fund. So the water fund, while it on this report is showing $1 million, as we move forward, we're not going to have the same level of a surplus in the water fund. It will offset in the general fund because if you're taking them off of the general fund, then your water fund will. Well, if you're including in the water fund, then your general fund no longer has to carry that burden. But so that's where we see general fund, $75,000 deficit. Right now, our water fund is showing a $1 million surplus. There's going to be a little bit of a balancing between those two to make sure that we're appropriately showing our expenses. So hope that explanation makes some sense. If not, please ask the question. That's what we're here for. Citizens address, please. Okay. So those are the two funds that I wanted to focus on in the monthly report. Now, if we go back to the table of contents, which is on the back of the second page, so the very back, we can do the same information on every page in here relates to all the funds that the Village of Dolton has. So we started off where you see 3 through 10 was the general fund. You see 12 is the water fund, 14 sewer fund, 16 the Melanie Fitness Center. So if there's any concerns or any just curiosities about any of the funds, we could do the same thing we did with the first two funds. Look on the corresponding pages, and that will show either the excess, surplus, revenue that we have for the village. So I ask any trustees any thoughts, comments, questions?
Only one thing, you said that for the water fund, we got some people working in there. They're actually being charged to that department, but they will no longer be.
It's actually in reverse. We have people that are working in the water department that are being charged to the general fund.
Okay.
And we need to make sure that the right people, and some people may have dual roles where they work. Let's say Public Works goes out to fix a water main break. The water main break could be charged to the water fund, while Public Works is their regular day-to-day. So we could have a portion of their time that's charged to the water fund, but we can't charge 100% of their time to the water fund because they're not 100% doing it. So those are the things that the Conspirit Group as working as our accounting company is working to do, so we have a clearer picture, because we want each one of the funds to stand on their own, so we know if the general fund is having an issue, we want to make sure that it's not due to carrying the water fund, the sewer fund, the Melanie, or anything else, that there's a true issue. And the same thing for the water. If water is having an issue, we want to be able to recognize that. Okay, so having said that, I'm going to move from the monthly financial report to the next thing on the agenda, which is the status of our bond payment. This is something we want to track just because 2 years ago we did have an issue with making the bond payment, and I think the communication just didn't happen the way that it should have. So we want to make sure that on a reoccurring basis we have that on our mind, and our bond company will also be reassured that we're on track, or we can get ahead of it if there's something that's coming up. So I just get a simple, I get a update in terms of where we stand from the Conspirit Group, who is doing the finances. If we go into a finance director, then they will give a similar report. And at this time, it's saying that the village has $2.397 million in cash and reserves that we have put to the side for our bond payment. The total of our bond payments is just shy of $5 million. So we're approximately 50% there, keeping in mind that we don't put money in there month after month as a savings. There's 4 months of the year that we put money aside for the bond, and that corresponds with our receiving the taxes. So March and April, we should be putting 45 to 55% of the funds aside. By August, September, when we get the second installment of property taxes, we should be pretty much fully funded for our bond payment and ready to make the payment for there. It's a consolidation of all of our bonds because all of them we pay in December.
Quick question for you.
Yes, sir.
What bond we're almost done with one of these bonds, right?
The Series 2004, there are actually 3 bonds that are almost concluded. Okay, so that's the status of the bond payment. In terms of the status for our water bill payment, And this is merely just to make sure that because of the billing cycle for the water payment, it does not make it onto the warrant list in a timely enough fashion for us to really make decisions. So I want to make sure that the check was issued and sent out. So he's given that the May bills, all of the May bills for City of Chicago have been paid. The invoice is due July 1st. Cash has been transferred into the account, and we're in the process of making a wire payment for the invoices due. So we are on track. We're still with the City of Chicago. That's documented just so we can have it on the record that as a finance committee and board, we've checked and things are moving forward as they should. On the financials, yes, it would show because the City of Chicago is an expense under the water fund. So one of the lines, it'll be a total for the year, a running tally for the year. Okay. There are no questions from the trustees.
Question, how much do we still owe the city?
I don't have the exact amount. I can check it for you. I can say that in terms of the City of Chicago, we pay them annually. So we pay our current bills, so we maintain current with what we are being billed. The back pay that we owe from the delinquency is paid annually, and it's been tied to our first installment of property taxes. So we have to make sure that there's money there. So when our first installment comes in, we can make that payment and be on time. If we get funds, if our water fund does generate surpluses that we can use towards it, we can use that instead of the property taxes. However, the City of Chicago was most comfortable that they tie it to our property taxes because that's a more regular stream. And if they get paid sooner, I'm sure they won't object. Okay, the next thing on there with item D is the uncollected balance of water bills from the community. This is a hot issue because we want to make sure that we find a way to bring the collections down. So that's the single sheet that I've passed around to everybody, or to most. I think I may have missed some that came in a little bit later. What this shows is by district, the total amount that's out there. And as of June 21st, we have $5.8 million worth of uncollected water. As we dig deeper into there was an error in some billings that has to be corrected. So when you look at the 31 to 60 days delinquent, that is much higher. Generally, if you have delinquencies, they would be carrying over into the over 120, which seems to be pretty consistent from month to month. 31 to 60 days is much higher than it generally is. So we have to get updates as a board and to the community on what happened with our billing within that cycle to inflate it. Our average or normal month, we're at $3.8 million of uncollected, which is still much higher than I know we would all like to see. But with this error that we have, and I'm saying an error, it could be in billing, it could be duplicate billing. So that's some things we have to iron out, and we will report back to the community. But we know this is much higher than we want. The reason we want to track this, of course, is ultimately as a board, we want to come up with a plan that we can start to reduce it from 5.8 to 3.8 and month over month track how our water billing is doing, because they have put some things in place, as I've talked with Administrator Scott and some of the team. They're putting things in place, and I know they're working hard, but we want to make sure that the numbers are reflecting the work that's being done. So having said, and one other thing on here, because I know we speak of it as having 3 billing districts. This shows 8 districts. Districts 1 through 3 are the normal districts that we go out and bill. They are residential billing districts for water. District 4 is actually our industrial district within the community. So that one gets its own separate. And then districts 6 through 8 are commercial billing, and those also correspond with the districts 1 through 3, but they're tracked separately, so that way we can identify whether there's an issue with residential or commercial billing. Trustees, any questions? Okay, so with that, I'm going to move forward. The things that we put on here under new business are generally one-time or infrequent items, but we still want to make sure that we're communicating. First being the status of our audit, because with our fiscal year concluding, the audit we should be prepping for the audit and make sure that we keep the audit going on a yearly basis. So we are scheduled for our audit to begin in September. And if there are no complications, we should have the audit completed by the end of October. The next thing is the status of our budget, because we know our budget, our fiscal year started in May. As of now, we do not have a budget. We have met with Casper Group because they will be taking the lead on getting our budget. But I have to say that we will have a draft budget within the next 2 weeks. And so the draft budget is the one that we will present to the community. I think because of without having a finance manager, and not to make excuses, because we don't want to come for excuses. Without having a finance manager, some things, this budget is going to be a challenge. I think the budget that we had last year, the budgets we've had for the previous years have all had budget deficits. Budget deficits that have gone through. And we want to work really, really hard to eliminate a budget deficit, because that's not the best way to do it. With the reality of our finances and things that we've previously committed to, is going to be a really, really tight picture for the budget. I'm saying this now just so that we can kind of see when we get to the draft of the budget and we're talking about it. And I think we have to talk about it as a board as well as a community. We want to start getting feedback on what do we want to do. We can't just immediately cut, because every cut means a loss of service. We definitely do not want to raise taxes. And then we have to look at what kind of alternative things we could do in the short term and in the long term. So I'm saying this more as a preface to the budget hearings that are coming, but we will communicate as best we can, as often as we can, so that way we can get as much feedback. And then as we move into our next year, we will have the budget conversation a lot sooner so that we can flush out better ideas and do it. Because I think we need to start the budget process in January so that way the budget can be put in place. However, today we have to deal with the reality of getting a budget, getting it in there, and then also looking at revisions on an ongoing basis. Any questions, trustees? Okay, and last but not least, I'm getting tired of hearing my voice, to be honest. So last but not least is Trustee Steve came up with what I think is a good idea, something that he's working on, a way that we might be able to reduce the collections within the water department. So I'll ask if you kind of speak on it.
All right, thank you, trustee. Municipal collections is another way to get some of the pass-through revenue in. I know we're talking about raising fees and cut off fees, but before we do any of that, I want to make sure the past due amounts can be passed off to a municipal collection agency that will collect it. What we talked about is that we have to verify, when I talk to department heads, we have to verify the accuracy of the bills that will go to the municipal collections. And then we were talking about doing maybe some things a year or older, and then also vacant properties. So there's a lot of verification before we send it off to the collection agency, but that's in the process. That's the next step that we want to do so we can reduce this, these past due balances that's owed to the village. So that's in the works. I've talked to department heads about doing it. So that's one of the things that we're doing to help get creative to bring in some of the past due revenue in. And of course, we want to verify before we send you to the collection. We want to verify that you do have that bill. But that's the next step. That's the next step that we're moving into. We can wait to the
we're right there at the citizen's
address. Where's that? Oh, you got it. Anything you want to add to that, Jason? Trustee, or any other trustees?
No.
The one area, and I think you mentioned it already, is we're looking to identify things that we deem likely uncollectible anyway, because as you know, if we go to a collection agency, we would rather get 100% of it, if at all possible, than getting the portion at the collection agency. So as Trustee Steve was mentioning, the clients that we're talking to will be people or residents maybe more than a year old. Maybe if we discover some are deceased or something. We want things that we can turn over and get something versus having an uncollected balance. But having said that, I want to thank everybody so far for their time and attention. I hope we don't need boxing gloves for this portion right here. Maybe I should have stuttered. But I'll ask that we go to citizens' address, please, and we will be here to answer as many questions as possible.
Hi. Hi. I'm Mary Evans, and I work with Municipal Collections, Debt Collection, and I invited Roger Wood and Jolene Wood here today. They are owners of MCOA. Trustee Steve asked me about the possibility of collecting delinquent water bills, and MCOA has been partnered with the Village of Dolton since 2011, and they've been pretty successful in collecting delinquent debt. So I did talk to them about water bills, and I found out that they already have a collection, a balance of water bills in amount of $356,000. So they already have water bills from the Village of Dolton. So if you will allow them to come up, they can explain a lot more about the process and, you know, how successful they can be in collecting these debt.
All right, please do.
Well, obviously, I'm Roger Wood. That's Jolene Wood. Back in fall, Yvonne Redmond and I talked about water bill collections. And I told her to identify what was out there that was a possibility to be worked as a debt. And she sent a file over of a lot of accounts. The vast majority were accounts that were still open accounts, not closed. If there's still a billing occurring on a residence or a business, it can't come to us to work as a debt. It's not a debt yet. It's got to be a final debt. Can't have balances of being adjusted every month. And that was the big issue. She went back and actually pulled out what Mary said about 151 accounts that totaled up to over $350,000 that were of that nature. They were closed. They were accounts that were now shut off and no current water billings. And so we have started work on those. The biggest issue in collections is always finding the party to have a conversation. And a lot of this debt was old debt, it wasn't current. So as we look at the future, what you're talking about on giving debt to us much sooner as it becomes delinquent, and the information about who that party is, we're pretty successful at finding them at the next place they move to. They're obviously already gone from this location, and our objective is to find them at another location and have a conversation about how they're going to address the issue. So moving forward, we can certainly be successful. Working with what was out there, it's not going to be a lot of success because we haven't found a lot of those people yet to have that conversation. We'll find more, but it's been difficult to find. The other piece that I brought up to Mary was that we currently put all of your debts that are assigned to us on the Illinois Office of the Comptroller Local Debt Recovery Program. Great program, works like a champ for all municipalities. And our objective is to get the debts that are sent to us into that program as soon as we can get them in there. As you have them loaded in prior to like February 1st, things start to happen through the tax season. Right on through today, they're still very active. We have not put any water buildings, of course, that direction, because we haven't been authorized to do it. The ILC has to look at it, say, yep, it's valid debt, you can put it on, here's the codes you need to use, and we go through a little process, and it's ready to go. That's the piece we talked about, really needs to be authorized so we can go ahead and put that 365 on there too, if we can get a match. They do a process with a what's called a pre-add file, where we give them the names and addresses, not socials, just names and addresses, and they match it against their database of all people who have filed an income tax return in the last 7 years, and match that name and address with that database. And if they get a hit on that, then they send that back to us, say, here, this one's a match. We can then select off all those matches and actually put them on their database so that the next time that individual files an income tax return, it'll get a hit and they'll do an offset in the amount of the debt owed to the municipality. So it's a super program, really works well. But that's a step that we've done with all the other debts, the parking tickets, local ordinance violations, red light camera violations. All of those are already on there, and it's working quite well. Revenue side has been quite good. So that's really the next step, is to try to definitely for you to get into a routine of sending us monthly delinquencies, even if it's only 5 or 10, it doesn't matter. If someone is now in that true delinquent category, they're no longer receiving water, but they have the outstanding bill, and it's gone past your standard deadlines. That should just be forwarded to us, and we can start working on it immediately as a debt.
No.
Okay.
One thing you mentioned, you need to get authorization for the local debt recovery. Does that require a board vote, or is that something that can be done through?
I don't think so. Mary, that's more up to you.
I spoke to Janice Johnson. I spoke to Janice Johnson, who was in conversation with Yvonne Redmond, and just got the okay as to whether we thought it was a good idea to contact the IOC to authorize them to use a code. They need some kind of code to put those bills on. So Janice said it was a good idea. I was just waiting for things to progress to make sure it was okay with everybody before I contacted them and said, go ahead. So you don't need any other authorization other than that.
Because the village is already approved to be a part of the program, and we've got codes already set up for all the other types of debts, not that one. So until that occurs, we can't add them on. So it's a straightforward process. Just what they do want to see with any debt process is what caused it to become a debt. Show us how you created this debt, and how did you notify people about it being outstanding, and they and as a result didn't pay. They want to see that picture, and then it's okay with them. You know. Thank you.
Well, it will be negotiated into a contract whenever you're saying the current one?
So you say it's a percentage that you get of the.
Yeah. Collection agencies typically work on a percentage of what is actually collected. Our fee in our contract with all of our clients, and we got close to 70 in Illinois, is 35% of what we collect. With most of the debt, all the parking, red light, local ordinance violations, they're a part of a state statute that allows the village to add on our fee to the outstanding debt. So when we collect it, or when we put it on the local debt recovery program, our fee is already included in it. So as an end result, when it gets paid, the village gets 100% of the debt, and we get our fee at 35. So both get covered when they go through that program. Water bills is a separate animal though. That state statute deals with fines, things that went through adjudication. But we know one home rule community has already changed that scenario with their own ordinance that says clearly, we're gonna add on fees for other debts owed to the village. So we know it's out there to do. Orland Park is a good example. They've already passed that so that anything that they send us to collect now has that 35% add-on fee in it already when we put it on the program or when we collect it. So it's something the board ought to consider looking at. It makes sense if you can do it. You might as well get 100% back instead of 65.
And Roger, can you give them an idea of what was collected for just this month for ticket red light violations and everything?
I don't know that I know.
Consolidated payments.
It was over 400,000, I think. It was.
This is just for 3 different payments. And there's 3 sheets attached there.
For, what is this for?
These amounts. There's 3 sheets there. 3 different bills.
Oh, okay, from the IOC. That's just IOC.
Okay, yeah.
And of course, we're in the peak tax return season because the offsets that they do, there's a 60-day period that they sit on those and give somebody the right to say it's not correct. So they have a 60-day time frame to object to it and show proof it's not my debt. And then they take it and put it right into the village's bank account after 60 days is expired. So we're always 60 days behind all the activity of the tax returns. But we're getting close to the end, of course, right now.
Okay, thank you for that information, Ms. Evans. Any other citizens address?
Thank you. Good
Yes,
evening,
sir.
everyone, and I want to thank you, Trustee House, for allowing this exchange. And I wish it would be returned to our board meetings where it's been restricted for freedom of expression or First Amendment right. I have quite a few of them here. I want to go down the line, starting with the status of bond payment. Can everybody hear me? Starting with the bond payment. A trustee asked, I think we have maybe a couple left that we'll be done with. One of the things that wasn't explained, and I think we got to talk in layman's language to people, because when it comes to budgets, most people's eyes gloss over. These bonds that we owe on, is our service debt, will it change for the new fiscal year coming up of approximately $5 to $6 million in servicing the debt, which is part, of course, paying back our bonds?
No, it will not.
Okay, so our debt service is still floating around $5 to $6 million a year,
Yes.
even with the new budget coming in, correct? Number 2, let's go to page 23, which is the Indolux. And if you see, it says our fund balance in there is about $1.5 million. The trustees just approved to have the administration fees go back to 2005, I believe, which is about the $20 million bond that the village took out for the Dorchester. Will this, once this is updated for May, will that balance show after the, as one of the trustees says, the cleaning up of the books and the trustees voting in to putting those about $900,000 in administrative fees, how would that affect that bottom line of the total liabilities of the fund balance for the Indolux TIF?
With the
Page
year on
23.
23, special revenue. No, I'm looking.
This is as
We
the end of
should
April.
see, I'm looking for the liability section of it.
And I believe that that was passed last month or either early part of this
Yeah.
month,
Yeah,
as far
we-
as those administration fees with
So
creating.
this sheet should update. It should update within the
Next
fund
month.
within the fund balance. Well, we just passed it in June, so it should reflect on the June financials.
Okay, so just an estimation, of course, we can't do it exact, based upon your experience and your knowledge, Trustee House, what would that figure be approximately come, let's say June, July?
There should be about a $900,000 difference, so we should see a difference in our liability going from 1.4 to, I would say,
About
about 500,000. Yes.
You say 900 or 500?
The end result should be 500,000.
Right. Okay. I just want the residents to make note of that, because the reason why I disagree with what was passed, because that's setting a precedent for the other TIFs. That means that the TIFs are being treated like a piggy bank. The TIFs are designed.
No, it was bad. Well, if I can, I want to hear your
Yeah,
question.
I
but
thought trustee had something he wanted to add to that. My issue with the TIFs is that they're being used as a piggy bank. Monies are being taken out of that TIF to pay the bills, just like the bonds are used to pay the bills. But if I'm in error, you can correct me on that, Trustee House, especially on the particular one at the table, which is Indulux. But I predict it'll be the other TIFs as well, that monies will be taken out to pay our bills to meet our financial obligations.
Well,
Did you-
now, if I can, on
Yeah.
this one, well, two things. Trustee Steve was mentioning that we brought it up for discussion, but it hasn't been passed. It will be on the next board meeting, which is July 15th. So when we're looking at when we will see it on the books, it will be in July's reporting. What
But it
we're
will be passed.
assuming, I believe it. Well, I'm in favor of it. I'll say that.
Yes.
I can't speak for any other trustees. I am in favor of it. What we're talking about is a difference between looking at what our previous bills were on our balance sheet versus the money that's in the bank.
Yes.
So if this passes, which is my recommendation, there will not be a transfer. So if we look at the bank account that has the Indulux fund, that bank account will have, let's say it has $1 million, and I can get that exact figure. After the passage, that bank account will still have $1 million in there.
Okay.
We have not put any money, we're not using any money in our general fund. So what the terminology of a piggy bank is where I would be in disagreement.
Yes, sir.
Because we're still using, the money that's in the bank is going to stay there.
Understood.
But it's reducing the amount of bills that the village is responsible for. Because right now we're responsible for repaying the Indulux fund, and I say we, the general fund is responsible for repaying the Indulux fund $1.3 million. When we were servicing the Indulux fund, we had insurance that covered the Indulux fund. We had finance staff that was looking over the Indulux fund. We had other things that were being done to the Indulux fund that we never took credit for in the general fund. So the reason that the reduction will come in what we owe is we already provided those services to the Indulux fund, and we never paid the general fund for it. But there will not be any, there should not and will not be any transfer in terms of physical cash from the Indulux fund bank account. It will reduce our outstanding bills that we show on our audit report.
Okay. One of the trustees asked about the payment to the city of Chicago, and I think you said it's an annual payment. And by the way, that payment is August. Every August is about $1.4 million. That's the judgment that was rendered to the village of the approximately $9 million about a year or so ago. So in essence, we're paying our water bill twice. The water bill that we get in our mail every 3 months, we're paying that plus with our taxes. By the way, those taxes will be collected from the county and go directly to the city unless there is some type of deficit, then we have to make up for that. And there's a likelihood there may be a deficit because I think last year we collected about 81% of our taxes as opposed to 86, 87%, which is where we usually float at. I'm almost done.
Well, I want to thank you for that. Now, I know you were
Yes.
in the courts for that one, so
Yes, sir.
I will actually defer on to your memory on that. I thought it was the first, but August sounds
Yes,
good. So thank you
August.
for the
Definitely
clarity.
August. The last thing I wanted to mention was MCOA. And he's very humble in how he explains what he's doing, but they're very effective in what they do. The elephant in the room is the management over at the water department. In order for them to do what they need to do, they have to have accurate records. And that's been a problem. As he mentioned here, he testified up here that if he gets the, I'm paraphrasing, if he get the accurate records, then they can do the next step. And I'm curious to know, and since one of the trustees said he's talking to department heads, I want to know who in the water department is qualified to bring the accurate records together, because the water department, as I stated publicly and I'll state it again, the management in that department is abysmal. I sent a letter to 2 of the trustees here, a very detailed letter and some explanation of the challenges with the water bill. Is there anyone in the water department or payment center that will be responsible to work with MCOA Miss Janice Johnson, and Mary to make sure those records are accurate. Who is there someone that we have in that department now as we speak? Would it be the department head or supervisor? That would be generally it. Do we have those individuals in place that are qualified to do that?
Yes, we do.
And who would that be? Without giving a name, just their position.
It's somebody over there now.
What's their position?
Supervisor of the water department, Will.
Okay.
And I want to say something. Please, you have to always cast aspersions on the abysmal and the reality of the village. Just make your statements. Don't make little shots at the current management of the water department. We're in process of moving that forward, and at least be positive. But all the cast aspersions is abysmal, and it's getting it fixed. We got people over there that's going to do it. We got new people over there, Janice Johnson, Elizabeth Scott, are doing, in your words, a yeoman's job to improve that. So we're going to move forward.
Okay.
May I-
Let me finish, please. First of all, I will not go back and forth with a trustee. I'll
May
be
I?
respectful. I will never get personal with any trustee. That's up to the trustee to do that. But what I'm doing is stating the facts. And again, as a resident who's been here for 20 plus years, when I'm paying my bill, I'm concerned. And when it comes to finance, and Trustee House, you know very well how serious I am about finance. And I'm a broken record on this. You may call it negative if you like, trustee, but I'm going to state the record. Truth is not popular. Popularity to me is not popular for me. I'm going to state the facts, and that when we state it to the residents, we got to state to the residents with truth. We have $6 million a year of servicing debt. That's not going to change when we get this new budget. Last thing, the problem is not revenue. The problem is not us collecting money. We collect about $18 to $20 million a year, but we're spending more than that. So it's obvious when the trustees get a hold of this budget with the reality set in. If you got folks coming in, you're paying them $100,000, and another one coming in, you're paying $70,000, but we're not increasing the revenue or reducing our expenditures, we're going to come up with the same issue, and that's not personal, that's a fact. Thank you very much for the time, Trustee House.
Yeah. And if I may, I want to speak to one of the questions
Yes, sir.
that you mentioned. Within the water department, in terms of the qualifications, one of the areas, and that's why we want to make sure that this is on the budget, is that we can start to see the realities. I've had some talks with Administrator Scott and the team, and I feel and I believe that they're working very hard to reduce it. So with that being said, there's the month over month is going to show, and either I'm going to be here getting my butt kicked in 3 months because it hasn't reduced, or we're going to be, or we will make progress. So I agree with your sentiment and the statements. We appreciate the passion,
Yeah.
but we are going to work very
And I look
diligently.
forward to it. And
Yes.
just so you know, since it's being made public, I sent a letter to the Public Works Committee and told them my concerns, along with a lengthy letter showing the challenges for people who just pay water. And if they read it, they can see that we need help, but we need professional help. And right now, I'm just not confident in the help, and I would hope, as you said, Trustee House, that I'm pulling for them that they will do it. And I'll state it for the record again, Janice Johnson definitely does a yeoman's job, and that's why I don't think she should have been passed up, and she should have been the village administrator, and not bring somebody in that was on the mayor's campaign.
Thank you for your comments.
I don't really think it's the people in place. Most likely it's the processes that we have in place. It's not always the people, but some of the processes. So if we can change some of the processes, and even the people, we train our people. A lot of folks come into a job, you don't actually know how to do the job, but with the proper training, you can do the job. So training, and then put the proper procedures in place.
I think it's both. Personnel and process.
Good evening, and thank you for the report. I guess, and I apologize, I'm just really not financially astute, but I'm sure in here somewhere is the answer to the question that I have. Based on the end of the year, April 30th, okay, can you just kind of, where are we as a village? Okay, are we operating as a deficit? Are we operating with a surplus? Compared to the budget, how did we do for the fiscal year? I'm sure that's in here somewhere. I just don't know exactly where to find it.
I'm going to say I think you're humble because I know you've seen a lot of these budgets, so I appreciate the humility. What I would have to do, because I want to give you a concise answer, we went through all the different funds. I would have to total up all of those funds. I have
That's
not
what I
done
was
that.
looking for.
Yeah,
Okay.
I have not done that.
Okay.
But in totality, if we pulled it, that would give us the one number. We are required, or it's what we consider best practice, to separate the funds because it shows that we are treating restricted funds as restricted funds and using the general funds for the intended purpose. But if you would like, I'll be happy to go through each one of the funds, total it up, and I can get you an answer.
Okay, I would like to know that. That way it would kind of, rather than go through here and make a subjective opinion, I'd like to have factual stuff, if you would.
Absolutely.
And my last question is, I think that somewhere in your open statements, you said that you kind of alluded to the fact that not having a finance manager makes things a little more difficult for us. Can I use that term?
Yes.
Okay. Are there any plans to get a finance manager?
We are looking for a finance manager. In the interim, we have been using the Casperate Group. If the finance manager search takes longer than we need, we will do a longer term contract with the Casperate Group. But I think we are hitting a good rhythm, whether it's Casperate Group or finance manager. And should we bring a finance manager in, the Casperate Group is willing and able to assist in that transition so that we don't lose any progress we've
Great.
made.
I think you answered my final one. We're pleased with the job that the Casperate Group is doing.
We are pleased with the job they're doing. Some things that, how am I going to word this? This is not a knock on them. So, no, we're pleased with the numbers. They're everything that we asked them to do because they are a CPA firm comes at a premium, and there are some things
Yes.
that probably in-house we can do. So we
Yes.
are trying to be mindful that we are not asking them to do work that we could do in-house.
Yes, I
So
totally agree.
My pause is because some information we may be able to get, we may not always seek because we're trying to find the right balance.
Yes. Okay, thank you.
We currently have a finance department. Like anybody is working in a finance, we have.
As just for the record, the question was, do we have a finance department? This Casperate Group is serving as our finance department. They are here on a regular 2 days per week, and they also respond on phone calls, emails as needed. But they have a team of four people that, depending on what the nature of our question is, that answer our questions.
And I have to say, I sat and met with the Casperate Group, me and Trustee House, and I do like the fact that they're independent firm. They have no leaning towards either way, and they state the facts of what it is. So I really do. When I sit down, they build a little crazy sometimes, but the fact that they give you an honest answer as far as this is what it is, and they have no leanings either way.
Okay, and with that, if there are no other questions, I'll ask. Oh, okay. And if there's anything that comes up, and not, I don't pretend to know it all or do it. If you're comfortable with my explanation, please call and send an email. If you want to get explanation from staff or from anywhere else, wherever you want. The biggest thing is we just want to make sure that questions are being answered.
Real quick, and pardon me for coming back. The trustee mentioned a meeting or two ago that there was a webmaster being hired and that our ordinances would be updated, our transparency ordinance, and thus far none of it has been updated. The only thing that's been updated, of course, as you all know, the minutes and the agendas for the upcoming meetings. Do we know when we'll be able to have that information so that we don't have to get it printed out when we come and that everything is there up on the website?
Yes, sir. It's in the process.
Okay, just so you know, in the last meeting, it was said that that person was being hired because I asked the clerk. And thus far, the clerk, and I'm putting it on the clerk because it's her responsibility, it has not been posted as of yet, and it's been going on for over a year now. Thank you.
Okay. Having said that,
So we do have a meeting tomorrow, right?
there is a special board meeting on different agenda items tomorrow. Yes.
At what time? Because it was a subject like
Four? I had five. Four? Four? I'll let you answer that.
It's one special board meeting tomorrow. It starts at 4:00. Yes. Yes. Yes, we're still Project Connect tomorrow at 7. Yes. 4 and then Project Connect at 7. Yes.
So with that, I'll ask if we get a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Okay, so I guess I call the roll. Trustee Steve,
Aye.
Trustee Brown,
Aye.
Trustee House, aye. Thanks, everybody.